Advances in AI technology have made the task of protecting personal information more critical. We tell you why. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, July 7th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we touch upon efforts here to protect personal information as well as to deter juvenile crime. For more on this, I have Ruy Valdes with Spanish news agency EFE Spain here in the studio. Ruy, welcome back.
Glad to be here, Sunhee.
I also have freelance journalist Raphael Rashid with us. Raphael, it's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Ruy, we start with you. Let's begin with the status quo then regarding the leak of personal information here in South Korea as well as elsewhere.
Yes, well, starting with South Korea, well, it seems that it's facing what it looks like a structural privacy crisis with repeated mass data breaches that have caused almost 100 million records exposed only last year. These in platforms that are widely used by all citizens. It's almost, one can bet that probably at least each citizen has got at least one kind of data breach. I mean, it's hard to tell exactly, but I would say an educated guess will tell you that. Starting, with some data from the Personal Information Protection Commission, they were mentioning that reports and consultations over personal data infringements rose about 25% last year, from roughly 40,800 cases in 2024 to nearly 51,000 in 2025. Then for the first quarter of this year, they already have almost 13,000. And the authorities are linking not only to major corporate breaches, but also AI-related abuses such as deepfakes and other forms of identity misuse. But still, going back to the corporate issues, there was a succession of massive leaks starting last year with SK Telecom. It was all over the media how it got exposed, how 23.2 million user records got exposed, and then that case was followed by the e-commerce giant Coupang, where his information was linked to about 37.5 million people, including names, phone numbers, and delivery addresses. There's also more recent cases in streaming platform TV, and including in government organizations like the ones that run the public bicycle services that affected around 4.6 million accounts. Why this keeps happening, of course, is the question everybody's making. Interestingly, investigators are not pointing out that this is like a very sophisticated scams. Many of their findings point out that sometimes there are just basic security failures from these institutions. So they are pushing them to improve the encryption of files, access controls, etc., etc. And while many experts are considering that also one of the problems is that these corporations treat cybersecurity as a cost instead of an investment. So that's why they could be a little bit lax or relaxed in a way about this issue. So just to finalize, well, the experts propose, of course, including zero trust security, which is an improvement that makes sure that the proper user is getting access to this information. And the debate also is ongoing beyond larger fines. Maybe later in the show we'll talk about the fines that these companies got for not having the appropriate security measures. But yeah, the experts point out that maybe that's not enough, so more should be done.
Right. Staying with what Ruy just said, Raphael, authorities here in the country, they have pledged hefty penalties against companies that fail to protect the data of their customers. What are the numbers that we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think the case involving Coupang is probably the clearest illustration of where things are heading. And I think those numbers are quite telling. Just last month, the Personal Information Protection Commission that Ruy just mentioned fined Coupang a record 624.7 billion won. That's roughly $410 million for the data breach that affected 33 million customers. and an additional 4 million non-members. The company is said to have also collected and stored the online activity of around 11 million users across third-party websites and apps, and the regulator was explicit that this was not a kind of sophisticated hack. In the chairperson's own words, it occurred because of Coupang's lack of safety measures and systems. The fine itself is nearly twice Coupang's annual entire annual profit of $214 million, and this, of course, dwarfs the record fine that we saw with SK Telecom of $88 million approximately last year for its own breach. And if I could just maybe go to the side just a little bit, I think what makes this also significant is not just the cost in terms of the numbers, but also that this has spilt beyond the regulatory domain, but also had gone into diplomatic arena. Coupang and a number of US lawmakers, largely Republican, have accused the South Korean government of weaponizing the regulatory system and process against the American company. And Seoul has pushed back, of course, firmly, saying that this is due process and accusing Coupang of lobbying so aggressively in Washington that it has complicated talks between the two sides. Coming back to the numbers, I think the fines themselves, the numbers are going to get heavier under recent legal amendments that I believe are taking effect in September. The penalty will rise, at least the ceiling will rise from, I think it's 3% to a maximum of 10% of relevant revenues for serious repeat violations. So some analysts say, well, if we look at the Coupang case and had it happened after September, when the legal revisions will take place, then the fine could reach something like 1.4 trillion Korean won. So I think the message is to the large platform companies, or for that matter, any of these big tech companies or websites that we're using every day. I think the message is quite direct that, if you have a single security failure, this could cost you a lot, if not an existential kind of financial threat.
Right. Meanwhile, Ruy, we've also been told that the presence of AI chatbots, it's reportedly aggravating privacy risks. Could you explain this reality for us?
Yes, well, people increasingly are treating chatbots as personal assistants or second brains, as they call it, and they feed them as with medical, financial, and other types of information. This becomes a problem if you share the accounts. So Wall Street Journal did a nice piece on this, just saying what are the effects when you share an account, for example, in a chatbot, I don't know, in ChatGPT or other ones, and they interview some people, which kind of problems they were having. A little bit of concern, I was thinking, like, especially for the young people, that, well, these services are not cheap. So if you want a paid account with a, let's say, decent level of power in these platforms, what many students do is they share these accounts. But by doing that, and using them not only for academic purposes, but also for medical purposes or any other kind, financial too, well, maybe not even on purpose, but the colleague or whoever they're sharing this information with can spontaneously get informed about things of the other person's diseases or the other person's financial situation, family situation, psychological state, and that become a very delicate issue. Also, when you use these chatbots in this way, between two people, the chatbot can get confused. This means that since the chatbot thinks that you are the same person, sometimes, I don't know, that they were making some exercises in the article, or they were showing that if you ask for your resume, it would paste parts of the experience of both people. And then, of course, this can scale up into a bigger issue, no? On the other hand, there's another article by Nature that is quite a technical article, but in a nutshell, it's saying how vulnerable we are into getting data breach on our medical data. Even though you can be protected by your use, by the use or by your account with the privacy settings of your account, there's a thing called training training data, the model's training data. So that, as we know, these chatbots get trained by the information they are fed to. So they are learning as you are interacting with them. So if somebody breaches those training data, they could kind of easily figure out if you have the disease. Why? Because they don't need to know the details of your particular case, but they could find out, this person belonged to a training, to the model training data that was for clinical data of cancer. And then they can figure out that you were a cancer patient. So they're just pointing out these kind of things. So the privacy leak is a little bit indirect. The AI does not explicitly say this person has cancer, but it may reveal the person belongs to data set who's defined the characteristics for having cancer in a better explained way. And also it points out that if you have rare conditions or you belong to minorities, you are also more vulnerable for data breachers to find out about your situation in different respects. The practical takeaway is, number one, try not to share accounts. In fact, the same companies strongly suggest when you get their services to not share the account with other people. Many, of course, can think, well, this is just like a profit-based statement, but after reading these articles, you can say, well, maybe it's actually they're trying in a way to protect your own information. And, well, the other one is to use temporary or incognito chat functions to reduce the exposure of this data.
Right then. Now, given these concerns, Raphael, the government here has also disclosed intentions to revamp the privacy protection system itself. Could you tell us a bit more about this ambitious initiative, and what can individuals like me do to better protect my personal information?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the government's own framing is that this represents a kind of fundamental shift, moving from a system centered on reacting to breaches essentially after they happen, towards one around preventing them in the first place, with AI-specific protections at the center. So the Personal Information Protection Commission published its 2026 work plan under the vision of kind of building what it calls a trust-based AI convergence society. So they have a big budget for that, and that budget has increased since last year. But notably, a large share of the kind of money is going to be going into research and development rather than enforcement. There's going to be some budget allocated for the AI era data protection, including AI-based security protection technology, and also developing safer data utilization systems. Practically speaking, the Commission has introduced a pre-screening system for new AI services and products so that privacy risks are assessed at the planning stage, not after the risks actually happen, so we can assess the risks before the product is actually released onto the market when we're all using it and then exposed to these risks. There are also some new obligations around deepfake content. Companies will be required to delete synthetic content on a victim's request, and the government is also drafting dedicated legislation on surveillance cameras and also footage processing. I think on an individual level, probably the best thing is to hide in a cave and stop using the internet altogether. But I think practically speaking, the honest answer is that these institutional protections only go so far, and I think they're bound to happen. I keep on getting emails from companies apologizing for another breach. And to be honest, I can't really keep count how many are happening. But I think minimizing how much personal data you share with these platforms is probably the most effective step. Also checking whether these websites that you register with have had any breaches, and these are becoming more easier to detect. Even on the government's personal information portal, you can find out. And I guess probably using different passwords across different websites and not repeating them, and also enabling two-factor authentication. I think those are at least the minimum ways that we can stay protected.
Right, some valid points right there. Ruy, speaking about the government's efforts to protect its public, there is talk about a plan to lower the age threshold for criminal liability. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, the South Korean government is considering lowering the age threshold for criminal responsibility from 14 years to 13, but only for juveniles that commit serious crimes. This is run by the Ministry of Gender Equality and the Ministry of Justice. They have been discussing this. It was supposed to be finalized, the decision, at the beginning of July, but I think because of the pushback and the discussion got a little bit complex, it's still in the evaluation. But basically, what they are proposing is that there are concerns that young people on the 13 years of age are committing crimes that are increasing, and these crimes include sexual offenses or some violent offenses considered serious. In that sense, they believe that maybe if they reduce this age to be, to get criminal responsibility, they would somehow reduce or prevent these crimes. At the same time, while these discussions were being held, a government-led public deliberation process recommended maintaining the current threshold, because there has been a lot of discussion that maybe we elaborate later that there's not necessarily a correlation between reducing the age for being criminally responsible for your actions to a reduction with crime. On the other side, the service do express that in general the citizens are kind of in favor of reducing the age. So you have two sides, maybe the general public, the experts that are, and the government officials that haven't been able to reach a consensus on this. Just to explain a little bit of the data where the government is basing these arguments, it says that the number of juveniles in this category apprehended by police rose from almost 12,000 in 2021 to around 21,000 last year. This is an increase of 80.7%. And among 263 juveniles in this age category admitted to reformatories between 2021 and last year, where there was a rise of, I'm going to rephrase it again. Among the 263 juveniles in this period, 83.3% were 13 years old. So this means they can go to reformatories, but they are not criminally punished. This is part of the current South Korean law, but some people believe that they should be treated as criminals or face criminal charges, of course, only when they commit serious crimes. Big question that probably we'll elaborate later is, what does serious crime mean? That part is, I think, the biggest part of the debate now.
Right. So, Raphael, as Ruy just said, this initiative by the government has led to quite a bit of dispute. What are the thoughts, the concerns, that is, of the critics? And what can South Korea learn from its global partners with regard to this particular issue?
Yeah, I think the critics' main concerns, I mean, they're quite wide-ranging and come from a broad coalition, whether it's child welfare, academics, legal scholars, even National Human Rights Commission, and also NGOs in the space, also politicians. But I think the first concern is effectiveness. A social dialogue committee assembled by the government spent around 2 months looking into this, deliberations, and then they recommended in April keeping the current age threshold, concluding that there was insufficient evidence that lowering the age reduces juvenile crime. I think Denmark's experience is the most cited example. It lowered its age from 15 to 14 in 2010, saw the crime rates and reoffending among 14-year-olds rise rather than fall, and reversed the decision, I think it was 2 years later, in 2012. So I think, at least on the surface, this is a kind of cautionary, maybe precedent that critics have latched onto, saying that this doesn't work, essentially. And I think the second concern is international standards. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child recommends that countries set the age at 14 or above, and specifically told South Korea in 2019 to maintain the current threshold. Its reasoning, again, is that 12 to 13-year-olds are still developing maturity and abstract reasoning. So I think when we look at the peer countries, they also follow this kind of benchmark. I believe Germany sets the criminal responsibility at 14, Denmark, Sweden and Finland all set at 15, and in many states in the US it's at about 14 years old. The average in the EU is, again, around 14 years old. So we're seeing 14, 15. So I think the government appears to be caught between these kind of competing pressures. After the Social Dialogue Committee recommended maintaining the current age, authorities reversed course and are now examining a kind of conditional lowering to 13 years old for the very serious crimes only, or serious offences only. But of course, the critics again will say, well then that's no compromise at all, since it means still applying a criminal record to 13-year-olds. So I think the debate still has some way to go, and we'll probably see a lot more over the next months, if not years.
I have to agree with you. The social commentary on the issue and the debate for sure will continue for now. All right, Raphael, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Ruy, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you, Sunhee.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching and see you again same time tomorrow.